Hello everybody and welcome to your Game Week 14 Deadline stream. We're here with the big Ben Dinnery himself. We're all ready. We're truly in a festive period as well. Ben, you've missed the remit, but I am in a Christmas jumper already. Are you feeling in the Christmas spirit already?
No.
That's when does Christmas period start for you then, or are you just not a very Christmassy person?
Well, certainly not on the 1st of December. Fuck's sake.
I mean, I've been wearing my Christmas jumper the last couple of times I went to the gym in November, so
No, mate. Kids, it's obviously different for the kids. The elf arrived today.
Lovely.
But look, we've got Game Week 14. We've got a full midweek slate, midweek 15, massive turnaround. We'll go straight into 16. We're coming into the busiest period of the year. So I haven't really got much time to think about Christmas. I'll leave that to the wife. I'll let her look after that. And look, I'll pay the bills.
I mean, I've been doing Christmas decks, bit of cooking already at the weekend. I've got mince pies lined up to make for people. I'm really in the swing of it. So let us know in the comments if you're on Ben's side that Christmas starts a lot later, or if you're like me and that Christmas starts as soon as Mariah Carey drops her tweet about it's time. Anyway, we're going to get into the injury news. As always, before we start, just if you need any kind of up-to-date injury news, we do have the lovely Premier Injuries website, alphabeticalised, like we do on stream, and you can click down and find out all the essential info. But also, you can message me or Ben on Twitter and we'll do our best. But as Ben said, it is a very hectic time for us, so we may be slower than usual. But Slav Show says it's a massive disappointment so far. Let's hope December brings some joy in FPL. That would be the present for all of us. So let's have a look. Oh yes, and Mark Nash says, do you take instruction from Mariah Carey? Yes, of course. She is an absolute queen. On to Bournemouth at the moment. Let's talk about the Cherries, Ben. I think I've embarrassed you enough. Let's talk football.
Let's talk football. Gary O'Neill, not Gary O'Neill, because Gary O'Neill is manager of Wolves. Andoni Areola. The Cherries, what a bad start to a podcast this was. Bad. Right, Bournemouth coming off the back of 2 successive wins, of course. One of those includes a great win at the Vitality over Newcastle. They followed it up with a win over Sheffield United, so don't expect too many changes from the Cherries. There will, however, be one enforced change. That'll be at left back. Lloyd Kelly, he's pulled up with a muscle problem last week. That was hamstring related, so we're thinking around about 3 to possibly 4 weeks for that, but it could be after the winter break when we see him back in action. That looks like a like-for-like swap with Kirk Kez coming in at that left-back spot. Everybody else I have remaining the same, which means Philip Bingham, who missed the game against Newcastle, is struggling to force his way back into that starting 11. But what I would say, the caveat ahead of this weekend, this is going to be a very difficult period for FPL managers trying to select those starting 11s because of those midweek fixtures and then, the subsequent game week 16 matches as well. So managers are going to rotate heavily. There will be a lot of management, and even those players who do start, we could see some with restricted minutes. So good luck to everybody ahead of this weekend. You're definitely 100% going to need it.
Yes, indeed. And that's why we're the best place. Do make sure you're subscribed. Do make sure to check out the Premier Injuries website and also Ben's Twitter as well for the latest injury news, because I love your phrase, Ben, availability is the best ability, because, if you're not on the pitch, then you can't score any points at all in FPL. You can't do it if you're playing other kind of mediums and interactions with the Premier League. That's the best way it's going to be. We've got some more comments about my festive spirit. John Hamilton says Noddy Holder a good shout. He is indeed.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, Geo Boy says Ben is my Santa. Do you have a sack full of goodies, Ben? And then Slavcho says she's always lurking in the back. Success has asked us a question about the Liverpool goalkeeper situation. As always, we do this alphabetically so people can follow along after we've gone live. So we will get on to that Success in a little bit, but welcome to the stream. But we're going to move on to Arsenal at the moment, and they're in a pretty good mood. Top of the league. Top of their Champions League group, already qualified. They can rest players. In fact, they did after going 5-0 up against Lens in the midweek. Is it good news all round, really, in terms of injury news? Nothing too much extra, I think Arteta said.
Yeah, no fresh injury concerns for the Gunners, which is obviously great news. Like you say, coming off the back of that fantastic result in the Champions League, they progressed through the next phase with a game to spare, top of the Premier League as well. Confidence is brimming. This is a lineup that I could potentially tweak. I'm looking at maybe Kai Havertz coming in and rewarded for scoring in successive games for Arsenal, maybe at the expense of Trossard. Again, we have seen a little bit more rotation from Mikel Arteta this season, again, around that squad management and the Champions League. So potentially, you have places, we do have a little bit of depth to that squad now. Jorginho is a player who will be in and around that team, certainly for minutes over the next few days. Ben White is one. We know he's managing that ongoing problem, which is why we've seen Tomiyasu play more of a part this season than he has done in recent times. I know he's over his injury problems as well, but Ben White is on the fringes of that team. He has been involved in the matchday squad, just not a lot of minutes. And in terms of Gabriel Jesus, he might be a player that Mikel Arteta may want to manage a little bit carefully because he's coming off the back of that hamstring problem. We'll go to a comment, and Eddie Howe nailed it this morning when he said, when you're talking about short-term injuries, more often than not, they're not a big problem. But we're coming into a time of the season where somebody, if you're out for maybe 2 to possibly 3 weeks, you could be missing 5, 6, 7 games. So what managers don't want to be doing at this stage of the season is taking any risks, involving players where, potentially they're going to be playing in that red zone. So like I say, that's why we may be expecting a little bit more rotation ahead of this game week than we normally would see.
Do you think as well, Saka, Ødegaard, sorry, not Ødegaard as much, but Saka was the 90-minute man. You always kind of relied on him to see out matches. Do you think that over this Christmas period that maybe he will be rotated a little bit as well, which might mean he might not get those late kind of game goals, which you get quite excited for in the Premier League? I think the most goals are scored in that kind of late game period time.
Yeah, I mean, we have heard there has been a sort of a slight change of philosophy from Mikel Arteta. He has spoken about previously that if you want to be considered one of the best players in the world, then you need to be, performing at those high, consistent levels, but also, playing week in and week out. Acclimatizing to 2 and 3 times a week. And he used examples of the Ronaldos and the Messis of this world. And he certainly put Saka, if you want to be considered one of the greats, then that's what you need to be doing. However, this season, like I say, we have seen a little bit more rotation and maybe a little bit more of a conservative approach from Mikel Arteta in terms of his style of play. And that's maybe more, quite often we consider Arsenal as being that team that tends to maybe fall away in the second half of the season, and all of that sort of early optimism, seems to go down the drain. So maybe it's, they've identified that and maybe they're playing, I wouldn't say necessarily within themselves, but there's certainly a lot more consideration for the long term, the latter end of the season, as opposed just to the here and now. And, like I say, they mightn't be as pretty on the eye, but they're certainly getting results. And, who could argue, say, top of the league and also top of their group in the Champions League?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. As an Arsenal fan, I kind of see it. I was a little bit sceptical at the start of the season, but, trust in the process, as we say, with Arteta and everything like that. It's a bit of a meme, but he seems to know what he's doing. We do have a question, though. Mark Nash says he thinks Havertz is a dead start this weekend. What do you think, Ben? Because he has played well. He he gives that extra option as well, I think, in the midfield. If the team can't seem to kind of break through the middle, work the half space, you can always lob it over to him, and he's got that kind of aerial ability that others in the team don't have. Do you think he'll be starting for that reason?
Yeah, I touched upon it before. I think just a little bit reward, coming on the back of those goals as well. I think it's probably the likely swap would be Trossard out. There isn't a great deal between those two players, and we tend to see that one will dip into a little bit of form. Trossard's been fantastic off the bench in recent times, so he can do it with limited minutes as well. And I tend to agree. I think we will put Havertz in the starting 11 for this weekend.
Geo Boys has one question. Vagelis Koo actually has another question, but that is about Trippier, Bowen and Watkins. We can get onto that because we will cover Watkins and Aston Villa in a moment. But Geo Boys wants to know about Zinchenko. He says 99% starter. Do you think more than that? 99.9%? 100%, Ben?
I'm never one to nail anything down 100% because there are a couple of ways in which Mikel Arteta could go with things. But I think, for the early kickoff, Wolves, it is quite a tricky fixture. It's not maybe the cakewalk that everybody would expect. I think Arsenal may grind this one out. I think you you mentioned it through the week there, 1-0 to the Arsenal. They would be very happy with that. And yeah, I see this back four pretty much lining up as this is, or five with David Raya, he coming back in. I'm not a fan of Aaron Ramsdale. So I see that for, and then potentially, we'll see how that game's pans out. If Arteta then makes a few tweaks in game, or maybe looks, for the midweek match to make those changes, because Zinchenko was one of those players, again, that will need to be managed carefully given his injury problems.
So let's have a look at Aston Villa now. Some people are asking about Ben White. You did cover that, Ben, with the Tomiyasu situation as well. So people want to wind back and just go through that. But I think huge news here. You're starting Ollie Watkins at the moment. But as always, it's this is a live document. Things change. Are you certain he's going to play? I mean, is it 50-50? What are your opinions on this?
Yeah, this is a tough one. He's such a crucial player to that Aston Villa team that I think if there's any chance that he's going to be fit and available, I'm more likely to lean towards starting him and then, bringing him off to protect the player more as of a precautionary measure. And it's those games midweek which, is clouding things and muddies the line a little bit. What we know, initially described as just a little bit of slight discomfort in training on Wednesday. Certainly nothing to write home about, nothing majorly concerned. So maybe it's a little bit of a surprise that Unai Emery's come out and he said, look, he is a doubt. We will not make a decision until after the final session on Saturday. At the minute, he's probably a 50-50 call. We'll ask him, see how he feels, see if he's ready for 90 minutes. I think if he is past fit, then Watkins starts, because what you don't want is somebody coming off the bench cold and then being thrown into that high pressure, highly fueled environment where you're maybe more susceptible or liable to maybe exacerbate, the smallest of little injury concerns. So that's why I've went with Watkins. But look, it is a very difficult call because we still have one session to go. The other main talking point has been around Matty Cash and whether he starts or not. Of course, he got the nod in the Conference League on Thursday night. And that's led a lot of people to believe that maybe, his time is up and maybe he'll get pulled out of the starting 11. He actually was withdrawn at half-time at Tottenham last week. The thing we've got here is Unai Emery has options on that right-hand side of midfield. John McGinn could shuffle across. We've even seen Tielemans across there. Zaniolo's been past fit. So there's three potentially players vying for that place, on that right-hand side, which, like I say, makes it difficult. But again, I'm going with Matty Cash for the moment, with Diego Carlos coming in at centre-back and Konza going in on the right-hand side. But, there is a little bit of flexibility within that lineup and that 4-4-2 as I have it.
Yes, indeed. So it's kind of not clear. A lot of people have been, that they asked you a lot in The Athletic as well, which you just come off of. Watkins, do you keep him? Would you keep him in your team this week? Would you start him?
Well, if I did own Watkins, would I keep him? Absolutely. Is it something which is going to be long term? No, would be the short answer. I think I would have him in the 11. If he's fit, he starts and he has a chance of bringing back some points. So for that reason, I don't see any other. The rationale behind keeping him is solid and sound. If he was to miss out this week, then I think it would be more of Unai Emery erring on that side of caution, and we could see him return in game week 15 anyway.
There you go. So let's move to Brentford. And what is the latest for them? Because a lot of people are looking towards Burmo, bringing him in, good run of fixtures, and the team seem to be playing all right at the moment.
Yeah, all right, without maybe getting the results, possibly that the performances possibly deserve. But, you'll earmark this game against Luton as one where they should be, or they'll certainly be hoping to pick up 3 points, despite, the recent upturn in form of Luton. As always, we would expect Thomas Frank to revert back to that 4-3-3. We're away from the big six, so we're moving away from that 3-5-2. And for that reason, although Rosev has been past fit, I wouldn't expect him to start. There's possibilities that he could come in on either flank, either on the right instead of Aya, or we dropped in Janelt a little bit deeper on the left-hand side. He could come in there. That is a possibility. But elsewhere when the team, Mupai as well, when we're talking about the three, would expect Mupai to lead the attack, looking a lot sharper since his arrival from Everton in recent games, and of course got himself on the score sheet. So yeah, this should be a good game for backers of Brentford.
And this is the thing, is like, over the last few games, last 5 games, 3 wins, 2 losses, you kind of expect it against Liverpool and Arsenal, but even in those losses, like you said, good underlying data. Their XG against Liverpool was almost matched with the Reds, and then they were slightly beaten by Arsenal. But with both kind of teams, they did hold out well. They played strong. They limited the chances. And so against Luton, this could be a big kind of match for them, maybe a high-scoring one, and one to keep an eye on. So I'm just going to quickly read the comments if there's anything. Hi, guys. Hope you're well. Oh, okay. Some people want to see the teams that we're playing. I can show mine, but I won't have Ben's. However, also Ben plays his very, very special style. So don't copy. Well, you can copy Ben. There's no reason not to. But Ben has a team made with all the players having links to your name. Do you want to explain it better than me, Ben?
Essentially, yes. It's I did start the season with surnames only. From, I think, did I go with Benjamin Dinnery?
Yes,
that may have been it. Yeah. But then I did wildcard, and I went with then first forename and surname, because I just didn't have the players available to make up anything that resembled a half decent side. So you know what it means. I do miss out on some big players, but it did allow me, when at that wild card, I did bring Mohamed Salah into the team. He's me big money buy. You know what? And what you would expect from this team is it is very much a roller coaster ride. When the template tends to do well, I suffer. But when everybody else has had a bad week, and then I can put a good performance and normally return a decent haul. So I prefer it that way. Like I say, I stay away from the normal classed as a very, very differential team. I'm not sure what the percentage wise is, but I think Salah is by far my most highly owned player, and the rest, I'm talking about the Ashley Youngs from Dinnery.
Yep.
I tell you who I have been stung by massively, absolutely do me head in. Ruben Diaz. Dinnery. Diaz has been absolutely shocking since I've had it. In fact, the City defence and Edison as well. So I haven't benefited in any way, shape, or form from those players. But, and obviously I cannot have the Erling Haalands of this world. I was gutted that I couldn't have a Callum Wilson. But, you take it rough with your smooth and you get on with it. And I'm enjoying the FPL season. I don't take it too seriously.
Yes, I brought my team up on screen because some people have asked for it. It's kind of fairly template. I mean, I think 300,000th position, not an amazing season, but not too bad either. And just hoping over the next few game weeks. I kind of regret getting in Colwell last weekend, but we'll see how that goes. That's probably the only player that I would consider as a weakness in my team at the moment. But let's go back to Brighton, the Seagulls. What is the latest for them?
Yeah, well, there'll be a couple of enforced changes for the Seagulls this week. Of course, another great result in the Europa League on Thursday night. So that saw them top the group and then also qualified for the next phase of the competition. There's possibilities of a few changes within this lineup as well. We have been boosted by the return of James Milner, was included in the matchday squad, and also Igor Julio. Sounds like that Geordie Fast Show character to the matchday squad. Now that provides a little bit of flexibility. We know that Lewis Dunk will serve a 2-match ban. He received yellow cards in quick succession last weekend. I think the second one was for dissent and saying something to the referee that ended up in that straight red card. So that's why he's got that 2-match ban. Now, potentially, you could be looking at a few different setups. At the moment, I've got Pascal Gross in at right back, but Veltman could drop in there with, we've got Julio. I go Julio at left back. He could also play at that centre back spot as well. Hopefully, Evan Ferguson will be okay. He's one that Roberto De Zerbi will want to treat with kid gloves, knowing that Danny Welbeck is out with a hamstring problem, probably not going to return until after the winter break in January. Also, good news with regards to Karol Matoma. He missed out that 3-2 win at the City ground through a minor, and also missed the recent internationals, but he was back and he got around about 70 minutes, I think, out there. Was it AAK Athens on Thursday night? So that was good to see. There may be one or two slight tweaks. The goalkeeping situation at Brighton, take your pick. If you want to play it safe, you just rotate Verbruggen and Steele. I'm not sure, how De Zerbi makes his decision with regards to that. They tend to play maybe 2 or 3 games each, and then he rotates. But there isn't much rhyme nor reason with regards to, good and bad performances. I think he just has them probably both on an even keel, and then wants to give them both a little bit of a chance. So the Steele one, Verbruggen, it's a coin toss.
Yeah. It's indeed, and that news on Mitoma is good for the community as well. We've had a few questions on him as well. What is the latest with Burnley?
Vincent Kompany always plays his cards very close to his chest. So in terms of actual team news, not a great deal. As you can imagine, questioning is about their performances in the league, and I think they've lost 7 straight games at home at Turf Moor, if I'm right. So it isn't great down there at the moment. Fairly large squad, but the players are all around a similar sort of ilk. And that's why we've maybe seen the likes of, we've seen Jack Cork disappear at the beginning of the month to injury, but sort of went unnoticed. Dak Hill is another player who sort of disappeared off the radar, not mentioned by Vincent Kompany. It was assumed that he had been carrying an injury, but he did feature for Belgium. Lyle Foster is a player that we do know who's accessing specialist support for his mental health well-being. The Clarets, this squad, this lineup could well be heavily changed. Like I say, with games coming thick and fast, maybe Roberts at right back is an option, and Dakhil could be a player that could come in maybe for Bayer or more likely O'Shea. And we've seen Jay Rodriguez start. I think he's started 3 in a row now after being, slipped down the pecking order at the beginning of the season. So he's doing quite well for himself. So I'd be very surprised if he didn't start this weekend.
All right, continuing over to Chelsea. What is the latest at Stamford Bridge? Because last weekend they were embarrassed. And Pochettino said this was their worst performance or something along those lines. It's weird, isn't it? One week they have a good result, one week they have a bad result. They play quite well, and then they totally collapse. And they're just, again, kind of similar to what you said about Steele and the kind of goalkeeper at Brighton. There's no rhyme or reason to it. They can play well against a certain type of team and then play a very similar type of team and get absolutely thrashed. So is there any team news that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, very frustrating from Pochettino. I think he went on, he said, I'm very, 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 very angry. And I think there was that many veries in that on the performance. And of course, he watched that game from the stands, which probably gives a slightly different perspective. And while the first half wasn't great for Chelsea, the second half, they absolutely capitulated. And I think we spoke on last week's live stream about my concerns with that game. Chelsea had a little bit of form, whereas Newcastle were, have this ever-growing list of absentees from the squad. I think we had around about 13, maybe 14 missing for the game last week. And I didn't have high hopes. I would have probably took a draw. I would have took your hand off for a draw before kickoff. But so to come away from that game, 4-1 victory was fantastic. This goes one or two ways. Pochettino could rip the team up and make wholesale changes. We know they're going to be forced into at least two. That's through suspension. Reece James and Marc Cucurella. That was a dismissal for the captain, and Cucurella picked up his 5th caution of the campaign. The Cucurella, that'll be like for like. Levi Colwill has recovered from his shoulder problem. On the right-hand side, Malagusto would have been a player who would be the most likely player to come in at right back. Unfortunately, that he's still managing a tendon problem, so it looks like he's going to be out of contention. Moses Caicedo returned late from international duty, so we throw him back in there. Badiashile into that back line, like I say, with Colwill, and that'll make up those two players. Everybody else, I'm going to leave as is. The reason being, we don't have any guarantees of any returners from the treatment room. Maybe it's Nkunku or Romeo Lavia are the two closest, but given the fact that they've been out now for what will be 3, possibly going on close to 4 months, they're going to be lacking that little bit of sharpness and match fitness. So maybe Pochettino gives the rest of those players an opportunity for them to redeem themselves this weekend.
Well, this is a good jumping point, actually, with the Nkunku return. The kind of latest news with Pochettino is he's almost there. But I think a lot of people are reading into that he's going to be straight in the team, straight scoring goals. But it's still a long period to come back from that. Giandro says how long till Nkunku is back. He might be back, but he probably won't be back to his previous levels for a long time. And especially with the problems at Chelsea, might take him a while to build up confidence as well. So what would you put on a timeline like that? Because, we've talked about ACLs. It takes people 2 seasons to come back. It's obviously not as bad as that. How long does it usually take for a player to get back to previous levels? So not just return to play, but previous levels.
Look, I think there's other considerations here, because we're forgetting that Nkunku, hasn't actually played in the Premier League before. So you're going to have that period of time that you're going to need to adapt the intensity levels, even the styles of play, because what you do away from the game, on the training pitches, maybe in bounce matches, behind closed doors friendlies, they're never going to quite be able to reflect, what actually happens in the Premier League. Now, typically when we're looking at something injury of round about maybe 3 to 4 months, again depending on the player and the position. If he's somebody that relies on that that dynamic intense burst of pace, that sharpness to get that yard, to lose a defender, to beat a man, those types of players can sometimes take a little bit longer. And then, don't be surprised that, if you're coming off the back of one of these types of injuries, then, you're not, or you're maybe a little bit more prone to picking up those sort of soft tissues, those muscle little tweaks, hamstrings and calves as you get used to the rigors of the league. So he will be integrated carefully. And a return to performance, look, I think if you've got Nkunku playing regularly or even a start before the end of the year, then I think that's a bonus for the Blues.
So we also have a few questions on Colwill. Jandre wants to know, I like Colwill, but scared of rotation. If fit, is he starting 9 out of 10 games? Is he going to be a solid starter now?
Yeah, I mean, before that shoulder injury, Pochettino spoke about Colwill. He was given glowing reference. He was talking about his ability not only to play at centre back, but also, that deputising out on that left hand side in the absence of Ben Chilwell. He was also keeping Cucurella out. It was only when he picked up that injury and he missed out the following game, that Cucurella was able to keep his place within the team. So there's nothing in the performances that we've seen so far to say that Colwill is nothing but a starter in that level. Like I say, he's held in very high regard by Pochettino.
And so this injury that he picked up as well, it won't really affect him now. He's over that.
Yeah, that was a shoulder problem. It was minor. I think it was picked up during the win at Tottenham. That kept him out of the England internationals. It was something that needed to be managed, but he's absolutely fine now. And of course, you can never be 100%. State that they're going to be absolutely fine, but it's certainly not something that I'll be overly concerned about.
And we've got one final question on Chelsea with Broja. What is the latest with him?
Fit, available, working his way back. We know, that long-term knee injury, that ACL reconstruction, had a couple of niggles and minor ailments since. That just needed to be managed. Again, you're building up his load. That's going to be a case of, that's going to take a little bit of time. I would expect, minutes from the bench. And then, we're going to get to a point where he is ready to start. But again, that'll come on a game-to-game basis, how he's performing, how he's responding, and of course, if there are any kind of reaction to that ongoing knee problem.
Right, so let's continue over from Chelsea to Crystal Palace. Huge injury blows for them last weekend. Doucouré and Eze. Doucouré's looks to be far more serious. He could be out for the rest of the season. But Eze, a blow as well. Especially as you said, during this kind of festive period, any kind of length of time out, and you're out for maybe 4, 5, 6 games. How long is he looking to be out for?
No timeline yet on Eze. He's meeting with another specialist. I think that's happening today. Fortunately, it looks as if he will not require any sort of surgical intervention. That's a high ankle sprain. Didn't look great, although the player didn't seem overly concerned during last week's game. Came off and was hopeful of maybe that it wasn't too serious. But he's been in a calm boot, still in a calm boot at the minute to fix that ankle. So that will remain in place, and like I say, until the specialist assessment today. We'll find out more how he reacts. So that will give us a better indication of what sort of return to play timeline we've got. But I'd be very surprised if what we're looking at beginning of December, again, any return before the end of this month would be a bonus. I think we're probably looking at a 3 to 4 week, maybe at best. And it could easily stretch beyond that, maybe till after the winter break. But of course, like I say, that specialist appointment today may tell us something slightly different. And we keep our fingers crossed for good news.
So, we have seen the return of Elise. He plugs a little bit of that creative gap. But Edouard and the rest of the attack, look much better with Eze in the team. But also, as Jandre has pointed out, Doucouré solidifies that back line. Do you think that's going to make this festive period especially tough for Crystal Palace, both offensively and defensively? Or do you trust in the abilities of Roy Hodgson to see this out?
I think it's difficult when you lose, 2 big players. Of course, Palace have performed admirably and scored goals in the absence of Eze. And yes, like you say, Elise come back with a bit of a bang last week with a fantastic goal. But I would be very surprised if he was able to maintain those levels consistently, over this period, because he's been out for such a long time. There's those hamstring problems. They're very worrisome. And, we know that fatigue is one of the biggest risk factors. We know that within that first 4 weeks of a return to play, you are at an increased risk. So they will be aware of that. The sports science department, the medical team, there'll be discussions in and around, with Roy Hodgson. and looking to manage his load. So maybe, like I say, over the course of these games, maybe you're not going to be getting Elise out there for 90 minutes every time. And you're then starting to maybe scrape the barrel a little bit. The Eagles do not have that depth, that quality, that certainly that attacking quality in. And I know Roy Hodgson has spoken about the fact that they will be looking to maybe bring in a few additions to bolster the squad in January, but it's about the here and now and what happens over the next maybe 4 to 5 weeks, and I think it's going to be tough.
Yes, indeed. Everton, looking on the face of it, 3-0 loss last weekend, but their XG was actually pretty fantastic, and I think the big change was obviously Garnacho's goal, but before that the team looked to be the better against Manchester United. What is the kind of injury information for the team, because they have improved over the last few weeks? They've obviously got that 10-point deduction, but overall the kind of discussions around the club are probably that they'll survive that they will stay up this season, that Dyche has done enough. So is there kind of any injury information that people need to be aware of?
I think for Everton to stand any realistic chance of staying up with that 10-point deduction, then you need to be keeping Dominic Calvert-Lewin fit, healthy and firing. So he is a slight concern heading into this game. He's been managed really, really well by Sean Dyche in his team, since his arrival. Hasn't cut any corners, hasn't rushed him back. He's made sure that when he has returned, he's played and he's stayed relatively fit. He's been scoring goals, and that's been reflected, like you say, in the XG and the threat that the Toffees now pose. But complained last week of a little bit of tightness. He hasn't been involved in all of the training sessions this week. So again, it's about, we have Beto available as an option for Sean Dyche, and it's whether he decides to maybe take a slight risk on Calvert-Lewin this weekend, maybe start him and bring him off early, or throw Beto in there and give him a chance. Like I say, these midweek fixtures do slightly muddy the waters because of that quick turnaround. So it wouldn't surprise me if Dominic Calvert-Lewin, was maybe sacrificed in this game, for the greater long-term good.
Yes, and it's that longevity in mind. Giandre says, we used to say next, but they're doing all right nowadays, but maybe not all right without Calvert-Lewin, because he is so important. He is their talisman, and he has improved that goal output for them. Fulham are up next, and, they used to be a team that were quite exciting. Now they're just kind of meh, aren't they? And I think part of that is obviously Raul Jimenez is leading the line, not Mitrovic, somebody much more exciting. But, do you think he's building a little bit of confidence? He did have that goal of a couple of weeks ago, or is it kind of, curtains for Jimenez at this kind of top level?
I mean, I hope not. Obviously, it was very sad to see his demise, post head injury. He certainly hasn't hit those dizzy heights, and certainly doesn't look anywhere near the player that he once was. You would hope that goal's given him the confidence. He'll kick on and use that as a springboard. I think he certainly has the backing of Marco Silva over Carlos Vinicius, who I don't think is convinced the manager in any way, shape or form. Muniz is going to be out for at least a few weeks. So, Jimenez, I think, if he gets a goal and he gets that little bit of momentum, then maybe, we can start to see that player grow and recapture, some of that belief in his own abilities. But he just looks a little bit, off it, shall we say, at the moment. Certainly within this Fulham team, there isn't much appeal. Palhinha, he returns after a suspension, so I'll throw him straight back in, despite the 3-2 win over Wolves on Monday night.
And apart from that, Fulham, pretty much everybody else is fit. This is basically their best team.
Yeah, you could maybe argue that Issa Diop or Tyson would maybe come into that backline. Certainly, it was one of those that was preferred over Bassi during those early game weeks. And also, Castagna playing at right back. Kenny Tete, before his injury, was that nailed down starter. And in the other position, maybe up for grabs, is Harrison Reed and that holding. We've seen Iwobi playing there, and we could put in Lukic. If you put Iwobi in there, you've then got the likes of Decova Reed, you've got Wilson, so there is a little bit of flexibility again within this Fulham team. So are those players, probably they're much of a muchness. So, we're all more or less there in terms of their strongest lineup.
Now, Liverpool up next. A lot of tension on them because, they're playing quite good. But also during this festive period, people have been asking you your beliefs on the rotation risk to the players like Nunez, Diaz, Jota, and obviously Gakpo as well, because they've got, such a litany of talent up top, but it's who plays each week. And especially with Nunez, really good kind of games ahead. He looks to be maybe a player that people want in their forward lines, have him in. But yeah, would you trust in him? And is there other kind of things that we need to be aware of?
Well, the absence of Diego Jota certainly helps ease some of those selection headaches. He faces a race against time to return before the end of the year. What we do know is Alisson is probably out for maybe 2 to possibly 3 weeks, targeting a return against Manchester United. Diego Jota is slightly worse than that. So at best, we're looking at maybe 3 to possibly 4 weeks. What Liverpool would hope is a return, before Mo Salah heads off on AFCON duty, which will be in January. So that remains to be seen. But like you say, we do have, lots of players vying for positions in there. Gakpo inherently has been, thrust in at maybe in midfield, given the competition a little bit higher up the pace, but he's spent a lot of time in that central attacking role as well. For this weekend, I think Luis Diaz gets the nod, scored his first home goal in Europe at Anfield on Thursday night. Nunez, from sheer just pest value, and he's been in decent nick as well. Salah's a no-brainer. The other positions may be up for grabs or discussion points. Left midfield, I've got Curtis Jones in, but, we like I say, Gakpo is an option in there. Also Harvey Elliott. And it's centre back, I have went with Joel Matip over Ibrahima Konate. The reason being, Konate started last night. I think he struggles to play games in quick succession due to his, history of hamstring problems.
And just kind of going forward, I guess we can discuss it as well when we get to the Newcastle team, but a lot of people have been comparing Nunez to Isaac. One of your questions on The Athletic was, who's going to play more over this festive period? If you had to pick one, would you rather have Nunez or Isaac in your FPL team?
Ooh, I mean, that's a tough question. I think in terms of competition for places and that starting berth, Alexander Isak is the only option Newcastle have really as a forward. I know you can put Anthony Gordon down the middle, but we have Callum Wilson out of contention at the moment. He may not return until potentially Boxing Day. So, that leaves Eddie Howe with it, just with Isak and having to protect him. And it's the, having to protect him given his injury problems that maybe causes a concern. With Nunez, we've just discussed that Liverpool front line and the number of options that Jurgen Klopp has at his disposal. So in theory, Nunez is under more pressure. He's a greater risk. So I would have to default back to Isak as being the player that I would have over Nunez.
Oh, it's a tough one though, isn't it?
It very tough. And that might be, my
Newcastle.
black and white rose tinted glasses. Of course, Newcastle's injury problems. If we were to pick up, 1 or 2 more injuries to key players, maybe like a Bruno, for example, or a Gordon, or even a Miggy Almiron, that would have a huge impact on the team. And I would see the pendulum swing more towards a Darwin Nunez. So, Isak, if all being well, Nunez, if, Newcastle were to hit some really, really hard times.
Yes, we'll get onto those discussions in a little bit because there is obviously a lot of injury news around Newcastle, but I thought it was quite a good discussion to have at the moment. Luton are up next. Any news on them?
Yeah, the other main talk point would be the return of Issa Kabore. Picked up a nasty head injury, a concussion, while on international duty. That kept him out of the game last week. So he's one player that could come in. But like I say, the Hatters have been in decent nick. I'm sure I read today that Rob Edwards has been nominated for possibly Manager of the Month award. So that's great news. That reflects all of that hard work that they've been putting on the training pitch has come to fruition. It's picked up some decent results, so we're going to pretty much stick with the same lineup as last week, with maybe that Kabore news as the only one.
Now Manchester City up next. They'll be wanting to kind of bounce back from a disappointing outcome against Liverpool, you might say. Tottenham, I think this is going to be an absolute rout for them. They're going to smash Tottenham. But what is the team news there? Because, as always, we've got the Pep Roulette. We've got a lot of considerations to make. Who are going to be the players kind of assisting Haaland in that huge destruction of Tottenham?
Yeah, so in terms of availability, Mateo Kovacic has returned to training, rejoined the group on Thursday, so he's back in contention. Also, we've seen John Stones named on the bench in the last couple of matches. Hasn't had any minutes. That's because he has been, coming off the back of a hamstring problem. And if truth be known, he wasn't 100%. So there was the concerns of, being thrown straight back in there. But he's almost ready now. By almost ready, I don't think this weekend for a start, but possibly maybe game week 15 or certainly game week 16 for him. Always difficult with this City lineup because of the fluidity between the players. You'll notice that there's no Diaz in this team, but they could quite easily go with a back four. No Rico Lewis. I'll have a bit of a think. There may be, a one or two slight tweaks to this team, but I'm pretty confident that at least 8 or 9 of those will start. It's just those one or two, maybe the Akes we know will not start 2 games in quick succession. So it'll be a case of, does he start him this weekend, rest him midweek, and then start him in game 16? Probably. Does Akanji go into, the midfield? Guardiola is one that he has been playing out of position on the left-hand side, but I know he does prefer to play centrally. So I give him the nod because he was benched in game week 30, and like I say, with Diaz maybe getting a rest, and then me hope as a Diaz owner, maybe him starting in 15 and 16.
There you go, part of the Dinnery 11. So continuing over to Manchester United, and I don't hold out hope for them this week against your boys Newcastle, which again we'll obviously get to as the next team up. But Højlund returns to the team. They've been riding their luck quite a bit, but Maino has made his way into the team. Obviously, Garnacho had that scorcher of a goal last week, maybe one of the best goals in the Premier League over the last few years. But what is it with the team? Is there anybody coming back to the team? Maino, like I said, was actually probably an improvement on a lot of their players recently.
Yeah, and Eric Ten Hag questioned, why he included him, why he started, and why he got minutes in the Champions League. He deserves it. He's ready, hands himself very well, understands the game. Eric Ten Hag said he seems to be a player that always has time on his hands. He's able to move it quickly, able to slow it down. So he has a great understanding, and very much maybe he's like Lewis Miley from Newcastle, a 17-year-old being thrown in at the deep end when the teams needed him, and he seems to be doing a job and doing it very, very well. I do have Rasmus Højlund leading this attack. I think I'm going to flip-flop that over and put Anthony Martial back in the 11. Højlund again coming off that hamstring injury, got minutes in European competition midweek, so starting 2 games in quick succession, maybe a little bit of a risk. I think maybe minutes from the bench at St James's Park, and then a possible start next week, depending again on how Anthony Martial does.
And are any of the likes of Johnny Evans, Eriksen and Mason Mount coming back soon? Because they were kind of penciled in for this period. What do you think on that?
Of those three, Mason Mount is probably the closest. There was a training ground calf injury. Now, early reports suggested that we would be looking at around about 3 to possibly even 4 weeks. However, Mason Mount has returned to the training pitch. He has rejoined the group. However, he won't be considered for this week. So, in theory, providing he doesn't have any kind of reaction, we're maybe looking at game week 15. But, since his arrival, he hasn't really been pulling up any trees. So, realistically, from a fantasy perspective, is Mason Mount, going to be attracting your attention? I would think not, for the moment at least.
There you go. So let's move it on to your boys, Newcastle. Like we said, you picked Isaac over the next coming weeks as the better player than Darwin Núñez. But what are the other kind of team news there? Is anybody coming back likely soon? Because, the team is so stretched at the moment that they couldn't even have, who was it on the bench that they can have in the Premier League because they weren't selected in the Champions League squad. This is a really, really stretched Newcastle team.
Yeah, Newcastle unchanged in Paris, and also Eddie Howe was not unable, but Eddie Howe saw fit not to make any substitutes in that game, which is, unheard of in his time. With regards to a starting 11, I have went with an unchanged lineup. However, Lewis Hall does come back. He was ineligible against his parent club, Chelsea, last time out. He is a player that could possibly come in. If he did, maybe at left back with Livramento, switching flanks, and Lewis Miley, again, nothing against the young lad in terms of his performances. He's been fantastic, but he's 17 years of age. So again, it might be a player that Eddie Howe looks to manage. Elsewhere, I can't really see any changes elsewhere. There's just that one possible player that would come in. But, I'm going with the fact that we played on Tuesday night. This game isn't happening until Saturday evening. It's a late kickoff, which is a little bit unusual. So there's been plenty of recovery time. I think Newcastle could be unchanged, but then Lewis Hall comes into the team for the midweek slate.
But there are people that might be returning soon. So you got Harvey Barnes, Willock, Sven Botman, Sean Longstaff as well. And also Callum Wilson, you said probably after maybe the Boxing Day fixture. What is the kind of likely timelines with them? Because, as soon as they come back in the squad, obviously we discuss return to play, doesn't mean return to performance, but at least then they can get minutes and maybe stop the other players from getting fatigued, because it's a ridiculous schedule going ahead.
Yeah, I think did we have 11 games in 37 days? Around about that, which, is difficult to navigate anyway. But when you're talking about a squad that's extremely stretched, then it becomes even more difficult. The good news, I suppose, was that Sean Longstaff, ankle, and Joe Willock, Achilles, did not suffer long-term problems. It's hoped we're looking at around about 2 to 3 weeks. What I would say is before Christmas is a bonus with those. Like Callum Wilson, maybe just a little bit behind them. Sven Botman, always get a lot of questions with regards to him. Unable to give any kind of definitive answer. And the reason being, it's a loading issue here. So these are ones where we're looking at the player's reaction to an increase in load on a daily basis. That assessment, those evaluations are ongoing. You could train for 3 days without any problems. On the 4th day, you might have a slight little flare up. They're going down the conservative route initially. If there was a problem with that, and at this minute he's progressing really well, then surgery is an option. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we're looking, at a good response throughout this recovery period, and we're maybe looking in and around that Christmas time again. If there was to be some kind of reaction or major setback, then, if we were looking at Botman going under the knife, then, we're probably going into maybe February or March next year, unfortunately. But Jamal Lascelles has been great.
Yes, yeah, he has played very well. Nottingham Forest up next. Obviously, they've lost their main man striker, Iwoyoni, and the rest of the team. What is the kind of news there for the Forest 11?
Yeah, Sangari is one that I will take out. He picked up a bit nasty virus while on international duty. That kept him out of the game last weekend. Of course, they lost at the City Ground. Highly unusual for Forest, but they can look to make amends with a second home game in succession. So Sangara will come out of that team. Elsewhere, again, Steve Cooper could, tweak a few places. But generally speaking, Forest have been performing quite well. Like I say, they're a different beast at home as opposed to when they travel on the road. So I'm going to have the manager keep faith with those. Ryan Yates is one that could maybe come in for Dominguez, Danilo for Sangora. It's centre back. Your namesake looks way down the pecking order. Sad times. So
yeah,
I think
it's ruined the McKenna Christmas, if I'm honest.
yeah. I'm not surprised. Me heart bleeds.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Sangor and Dominguez are the two players which that I may look to change. Sangara, almost definitely.
Sheffield United up next. Tough times for them, but what is the latest?
I was very surprised to see Ollie McBurney not in the starting 11 last week. I know he was coming off the back of an injury and he couldn't play 90 minutes, but I thought he's always good for 50 or 60, comes off the bench and he was involved. Of course, he got himself the goal. So Ollie McBurney comes in, and also it's centre-back, the Serbian international, Ahmed Hodzic.
I think he's Bosnian.
Oh, after I got the name right and I've got the wrong nationality. Well, in that case, I apologize. The Bosnian, Ahmed Hodzic.
Yeah.
He is.
You said that quite well, though. I'm very impressed with that.
Pity. Can we edit? Can you edit that?
No, I can't, because we're live. It's a shame. That's why you can't swear or fart or any of those things that we never ever do in off air kind of interactions. But yes, I mean with Sheffield United, the sad kind of thing is all their injury news is that anybody who is likely to come back, it's New Year, isn't it? There's nobody going to help boost that squad, especially now during this really, really difficult run.
Yeah, it's difficult. There's a lot of long-term absentees in that one. Ryan Booster, he came in, had suffered another setback, but had spent the best part of a year on the sidelines. We have seen Norrington Davis back on the training pitches, not fully involved with the squad, but taking part in aspects of training. But he's been out for 13 months. Jebison, there is no timeline for that. We're talking several months. Chris Basham, that was a pretty horrific injury. Be very surprised if he was to play again this year. Tom Davies, just as he was approaching full fitness, last kick of a training session, ends up needing surgery. So, again, once these players are coming back, there's a return to performance there, which, it's going to take some time, and whether they get the opportunity to do that, because the pressures on Sheffield United are such that you're going to need players to really just sort of hit the ground running and hopefully get the job done for Paul Heckingbottom. It's a tough position to be in.
Yes, indeed. Tottenham up next, and as we've described, I don't think they're going to have any chance against Manchester City this weekend. Total kind of fall from grace. But you've even had to kind of put together a makeshift back line. Huge disappointment with Rodrigo Bentancur. Another kind of injury to him. This makeshift back line is, as it is at the moment, due to injuries, suspensions, all kinds of issues with the team. It's not looking good for Tottenham at all, is it?
It isn't. I mean, although Ange did have Eric Dyer on the bench last week, and he decided to go up for Emerson Royale, which was I don't know, slightly what kind of decision would you put that down to? Surprising. Let's just say it was slightly
Yeah.
surprising. There will be at least one change in this team. And maybe I might even throw Eric Dyer in there as well to try and counteract the aerial threat of Erling Haaland. I'd certainly see him more of a out and out centre back as opposed to Emerson, who was, will give you a little bit more going forward. But against Manchester City, you're going to need to be doing your job at the back before having any hope of getting anything going forward. Pape Sarr is out of the game, so we'll have to see who we can look to maybe bring in. Like I say, Bentancur, you mentioned that he's out. We're looking at probably a couple of months. That was a tackle by Matty Cash, if I recall correctly. And we'll probably lean towards maybe Oliver Skip as a player coming in. So maybe Dyer and Skip for Emerson and Sarr.
And I mean, coming into the new year as well, Bissouma and Sarr are going to be going off to the African Cup of Nations. What kind of ragtag team are they going to be able to put together 2024? We do have a question from Jay Andre. Is it time to get out Son? He seems to struggle without Maddison. I'd say a big yes. I'd just see Tottenham really, really struggling now. What about you, Ben?
Look, certainly for this weekend, it's I'm not expecting anything. And, I know Tottenham have had a bit of the hoodoo over City in recent times. Is it 3 of the last 4 and 5 of the last 7 in the Premier League that they've actually won? I expect City to right some wrongs this weekend. And, this could be a 3 or a 4 quite easily. I do like Son because, he's out of position and he's one of those players that, can create something out of nothing. But absolutely agree with you, Jason, that he does lose something without that creative prowess of James Maddison. So I don't see anything wrong necessarily with moving away from Son at this time, given that Tottenham have got those problems and this big dip in form.
Yeah, I mean, Son is absolutely world class. We look at his finishing. I think he's one of the best overperformers on XG. But he's not creative, and so if he's not getting the opportunities, which he won't without Maddison, it's kind of hard to see him perform well. We saw it in big kind of stretches last season when Tottenham just weren't at their best. Harry Kane absolutely kind of pulled that team through the mud, and that there's not that creative force there. Son is going to struggle. GV has asked, I guess, to reiterate the name of the manager.
Who, Ange?
Yeah.
Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
You got that spot on. I don't know why. You said it's right the first time.
Yeah. Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah. Algot Tersing has said Son, Bowen or Mbermo in terms of your team. Who would you have?
Just for this one game week, Brian Mbeumo.
Like it. Vagelis Koo has says, is it worth doing Trippier, Bowen and Watkins to Lascelles, Palmer and Haaland for a -4? What do you think?
I'm never one for taking hits, and especially around game weeks where there's little bits of uncertainties with regards to, like I say, rotation, player management. That's going to bring around anomalies in results. And therefore, I'm always wary about taking hits because sometimes, they can come back and bite you on the backside.
So with that team, see, I'm going to have to say go for the -4 because he's putting Haaland into his team. I don't think you can go in this festive period without Haaland. It's lunacy with some of the games coming up.
I mean, yeah, I agree with that in terms of the long term, but we're also looking at the fact that we know he's carrying this ongoing ankle issue that keeps on flaring up, aggravated again during the international break. So, goals can come anywhere from that City lineup. So you could quite easily see a City team going up 3 and 4 and Haaland not being on the score sheet. Unlikely. And, then maybe is Pep bringing him off. But I was talking about specifically for this week and taking a game, taking a points hit.
Okay.
I wouldn't.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, at the moment, I think the best advice is to keep transfers as much as possible because there's going to be strange injuries. There's going to be really kind of fires to fight in your squads over the coming weeks, because we have seen an increase in injuries. You've combined with, was it the Times and BBC Sport on some articles around that? People do check that out, but also, it is Christmas. We know from previous years it's really hard to predict. So use transfers wisely. We're moving on to West Ham now. We're about to wrap it up. But I guess the big news is on Bowen. Is he, isn't he? Is he going to play? Or if he doesn't play this week, is he going to be back soon?
I understand it could be a loading issue. So again, that's what creates that level of uncertainty. And maybe a lot of people having a pop at David Moyes and not giving any kind of definitive answers. And that's because, again, players being evaluated on a daily basis. You can train and work and be fine. Then all of a sudden, you have this slight reaction and that sets you back at that increased load. So we have one more session on Saturday before any decisions are made. The gambler would go with Bowen because he isn't, he has a chance. If you wanted to play it safe, you would maybe go with a Danny Ings. The other three players, I suppose, in the conversations would be Mohamed Kudus, Vladimir Soufal, and Julian Alvarez. Those three players failed to travel with the Hammers squad midweek. That was due to illness, carrying a virus. So again, I have included them, but these are difficult ones to ascertain exactly what's going on. We would need to see them back on the training pitches and training normally on Saturday for those players to come into consideration. I'm hopeful that will be the case, but again, just making you aware that in theory, they are flagged as potential doubts.
Yes, indeed. So it's kind of a not clear situation on Bowen then. It's very similar to other discussions that we have. Mark has said, Ben, any idea about the West Ham? Not sure. Oh, the West Ham virus. Will those players be fit for Sunday? You've kind of covered that a little bit.
Yeah, difficult in terms of how players are going to respond, how much training they're able to get, if they're past fit, are they ready to start, or maybe is it something that David Moyes just looks to bring them, on the bench or just have them there for numbers. Players will respond differently to that. So I have all three starting, but again, there are, as with always, even with injuries, there are no guarantees.
And finally, we move to Wolves, and you've got an interesting tactic here Gary O'Neill is deploying, but the team are playing fairly good, and this is why I'm a little bit worried about against Arsenal. He seems to know how to play the big boys. He causes difficulty, but this is away at the Emirates, so do they at least have a fit best 11 to be able to take on Arsenal?
It depends on whether that best 11 would include the likes of Pedro Neto, who was arguably during his time when he was fit, their standout player of the season. I think he returned 7 assists, which is better than last season's haul. I think that's maybe his best haul ever for Wolves. So he was outstanding. Good news is with Neto, he is progressing. He has returned to the training pitches, not fully with the squad, still doing some individual work, but not too far away. So like I say, we will see Pedro Neto before Christmas. Craig Dawson is back after serving a 1-match ban. So that's a big boost for them. We probably expect this 3-5-2 in attack, or maybe, that 5-3-2 when defending at the Emirates. And yeah, look, I'm with you. I think it should be a good game. I do like watching Wolves, and I really, really like Gary O'Neill. I think he conducted himself in a fantastic manner, considering some of those decisions that have went against him in his team this season. I'm really interested. I follow what he says. I follow some of his sessions. I love his analysis. So yeah, I'm looking forward to a good game tomorrow.
Mark has said Lamina and Gomez are both suspended for Arsenal. Is that true, Ben?
Oh, is it?
You have to look it up. I'll quickly witter on about another question that people have asked.
Well, I will have to hold my hands up and say I have had absolutely no idea whatsoever.
I mean,
look, I do injuries, not suspensions. That's that in my defense. I'm just checking that out now as well as we speak live on air.
I mean, the reality is
Oh yeah,
you can't be perfect all the time, Ben.
I
But
hold my hands up, and yeah, so that is a massive oversight on my behalf. So appreciate that heads up, and I'll take that one for the team and pull this team to bits.
thank you, Marky Mark. That's very kind of you, and just letting everybody else know. Algot Tersing has said, do you guys think Cunha is a great differential? I'm not too sure, in my opinion, because obviously Wolves, like I said, Gary O'Neill has got them playing well, but it's kind of little kind of strong defence, attack not so good. Obviously, people will go, oh, they've conceded a lot of goals, but it's kind of that they seem to shut out or control the games against teams when they go up. We've seen those points picked up against the likes of Tottenham, Manchester City. They have that ability, and so I think it's kind of akin to Burnley a few years ago under Sean Dyche. It's I don't think an attacking option from Wolves is the best. But yeah, well done, Mark, for pointing that out. Ben, what do you think? And also, GV does want to know when Pedro Neto is back.
Yeah, what I would say definitively before Christmas. Training individually, but training outside on the grass. So stepping up, progressing really well. Of course, you've always got to be careful with hamstring injuries, but if he continues on the same trajectory, I think probably midweek next week would be a little bit too early. Game week 16 can't be totally, ruled out of the question if he was to, be integrated back with the group. I certainly wouldn't think a start. So maybe, if you're thinking about pushing for a potential start, then maybe games weeks 17, 18-ish around that. So again, not too far away, doing really, really well.
Well, that is all for Game Week 14. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Ben is frantically working away because obviously we've got the latest team news and everything. So I guess, maybe you can put Mark in there and the Wolves kind of bit of the the latest injury news. But
you know why I overseen that one? Because it was a game on the Monday night. So that's why I missed that one.
Love it.
Busy. I was busy on Monday.
Yes.
I didn't realise.
You've
accumulations of 5 yellow cards, you see.
Yeah. I mean, you've got a life, Ben. You can't be watching football all the time. But anyway, we're going to love you and leave you. Have a fantastic Game Week 14, everybody. We will see you. I guess we're going to be going early because it's an early kickoff next week. So what date and time is our next broadcast?
Well, I suppose if possible, we will go live on Tuesday for the early deadline. Time to be confirmed. We have a look around the press conference. We'll try to get as much information together as possible, so we're bringing you the latest and most up-to-date information. It could be that we're looking at maybe something around maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock. If that doesn't work, then maybe a lunchtime. But we've got a little flexibility in and around that. So, like I say, keep your eyes and ears peeled and we'll let you know.
There you go. Well, have a fantastic Game Week 14. See you all very soon. And enjoy your festive period, because even if Ben says it's not, I think it is. Merry Christmas. Not yet. But Merry Christmas time.